My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
Yes, good afternoon and welcome to LGBTlife, and for those of you just tuning in for the first time, we had the signature tune long before that car insurance company did, but I'm delighted to say that my guest this week is Councillor Francis Timmons, who's come in all the way from Clondalkin. So Francis, welcome back to East Wall, welcome back to Dublin
Thank
CFM.
Thanks for having me.
Francis, the last time we had you in here, the first time you were running for the council and you became very successful. Then we had you back again, and people were saying what a great job you're doing. We're at the next phase of the Francis Timmons evolution. There's a general election coming up, and you're going to be a candidate in that. Excited?
Very excited. It's a lot of work, Mick. I'm a first-time councillor, as you know, and I came here.
And an independent.
An independent, elected for Dublin Mid West, elected for the Clondalkin area, and to run for Dublin Mid West is a huge task. It's a huge area. It's got many different problems and many issues that are very complex in different areas, and it's going to be an upward battle to win a seat, but I'm in it to win it.
Yeah, at the moment, and I know that we'll take all of this stuff with a pinch of salt, Paddy Power has you as the rank outsider. I mean, that would be difficult to get a seat from that position, but in essence, is this Francis saying, well, let's test the water, and there's probably going to be another one in a couple of years' time, and you're going to be a much more experienced candidate by then? Or
Absolutely. I mean, one of the main things is to raise issues, and this is important. There's some issues that we'll talk about today that are important, and if I use this opportunity, obviously, I mean, I'm in to try and win a seat.
Of course you are, yes.
If I don't win a seat, I'll still represent the people of Clondalkin as a local councillor, and as you said, possibly go run in the election after that, depending on how I do.
Yeah. This time round, I don't actually know if we're going to have any more LGBT candidates than we might have had in the past. Now, certainly the word I'm hearing is that we'll probably have less LGBT representatives than we had in the past. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's just part and parcel of the normal evolution, or...
Well, I think it's important that every sector is represented in the next Dáil, and obviously, like I've said before, I see myself as Francis Timmons, local councillor in Clondalkin. I don't really see myself as, although I am gay, I don't see it as a huge issue. But I think it's good to have a voice on the council, and hopefully in Dáil to raise a lot of the issues that are still there.
As an independent, you, to a certain degree, you have to appeal to probably a much wider base, because you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the financial resources. Does that, is your life experience, does it help you to, as I say, to cross those boundaries better than, say, somebody who was died in the wall, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil or Labour? I
think from going around lately, I've been obviously delivering a lot of leaflets, going around thousands of doors, talking to people, and there is a huge mood for change. There's a huge mood towards independence and Sinn Féin in particular. And life skills, obviously my background in social care does make it that I can relate to people with disability, I can relate to people homeless, I can relate to the probation service and people that are in trouble with or are tied up in that. So I think a lot of that does kind of make it. I'm also kind of, as I said before, very involved on the ground, and haven't changed that since I joined the council. If anything, I'm probably more involved in different committees since I got elected.
Yeah. No, I want to because what I have found is that in many respects, and we hear this word change a great deal, particularly over the last year to 18 months, and I wonder what that actually entails. And if you listen to the parties to say, well, it means us rather than them, or so on and so forth. My interpretation, based on talking to people, listening to people, of what I've seen is that the change people really want is is a change more in favour of participatory politics as opposed to representative politics. It's not saying we don't want Francis Timmons, but we want Francis Timmons in a different way, and we certainly want the political parties in a different way. And to me, that's been borne out by the various very, very large protests that we've had. How do you feel about
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. I've been out on nearly all the water marches, and I've spoken to probably hundreds at least, if not thousands of people. I think while we might see some recovery, and there are people that are seeing a recovery, I think there's a lot of people that are not seeing that, and I think there's a whole new middle income sector that are finding it very tough and finding it very difficult to live day to day. I was talking to an elderly lady up in Lucan there last weekend, and she had to make the choice twice a week. Once or twice a week she doesn't have food. So that's the type of recovery, that's the type of society. So I think that's where the change is. What kind of an Ireland do we want going forward? And you know, if it's going to be recovery, it needs to be recovery for everybody.
Yeah. Let's go back, because I covered the Dublin North Central constituency in 2005. I chaired a panel discussion. It was quite interesting. If you go back to that, I only listened to it yesterday. They were all basically saying, you know, the real big issues out of that was jobs and, if you like, political or government reform. Now, there's been very little government reform. We'll leave that to one side. But talking about the election, and it comes across in various guises, people are putting the economy central, because I think politicians are putting the economy central. But my personal perception is that that's only half of the battle. In other words, if we do not look at the consequences of the economy, we really are just storing up problems. Again, how do you feel about that?
At the back of it all, there are people's lives at stake here. There's people that are living in, as I said, very poor conditions. We have a huge issue around Balgady, particularly we talk about Dublin Mid West, but we have a huge issue around Balgady and the housing up there and the condition of the housing. There was a case brought to Europe there where they won the case. We're now waiting for South Dublin County Council to respond back to dealing with these issues, which is painfully slow. And I'd be well known for highlighting those issues. Excuse me. I think it's important that, again, go back to that, yes, we talk about recovery, but they have to be real jobs as well. There's a lot of a lot of these things that are schemes, that are zero contract hours. You can't build a life on that. You can't buy a house. You can't plan your future based on that. And I think, like I keep saying, I think a lot of people in Dublin Mid West are not seeing the recovery that's so, you know, been talked about in the national media.
I tend to watch the financial channels in the morning, because for a start, that's you know, that's my interest. I studied economics, but what I have seen over the last, say, since 2007, and if you actually get to look at a movie called The Big Short, you'll understand why I'm actually saying this. What we experienced throughout the Western world was one of the largest transfers of wealth from one sector to another, and it didn't go from the poor to the rich to the poor the way Robin Hood would have it. It actually went the other way around. That inevitably has economic consequences that you're talking about. Do you think that perhaps should be the central issue rather than
Absolutely.
talking about some hypothetical recovery?
The real issues are, and that's why the real issues are for Dublin Mid West are the hundreds of people that are living in second class accommodation. They're living in damp, they're living in squalor. And the people deserve better. And even this was an issue that Balgady's been neglected now for about 10 years. We also have travelling site in Clondalkin, which is contentious, that it's a temporary travelling site for years. The council have failed the people in there. With great campaigning and a lot of effort, we've managed to get proper water facilities and stuff in, electric facilities into the site. But if we're talking about a real recovery, we're going to have to talk about real people and real issues. And it's okay to say, well, not okay, but it's very easy to say that, you know, there are some people that are doing very well. There's a lot of poverty. We've a homeless problem in Clondalkin. probably one of the highest in the area. We've 9,000 people for Dublin Mid West. We've 9,000 people in South Dublin County Council on the housing list. 6,000 of them are Dublin Mid West. So we've huge issues that are not, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm on the council nearly 2 years now, it's been a huge failure to deal with the housing crisis.
Okay, let's look at something then, Francis. I had a representative of the Labour Party in on council matters about 2 weeks ago, and I specifically asked him what he believed the role of a minor party in a coalition government should be, and his answer really wasn't necessarily that satisfactory, but I'm not going to go into it further. My view is that, particularly in opposition, is that you're there to hold the government to account.
Yeah.
The government will probably say they had no choice, that they inherited such a bad position that they really had to, the first thing to do was, if you like, stop the boat taking in water. To a certain degree, we probably both agree that has happened to some degree. Now, what do you see their priority should be, particularly if you were an opposition TD, there to hold them to account?
Mick, I do agree that there were hard, difficult choices to make.
Yeah.
I think some of the choices were very badly informed. I think 5 austerity budgets have left, especially middle-income families, not very well off. And my own family have been affected by this as well. But priority should be, a redistribution of wealth and a redistribution of the recovery. Everybody has to see it, and like I keep coming back to, and I mentioned Balgady again, as I do several times up at the council. Balgady is an issue that we've thousands of people living up there. We've got young children that are going to end up with serious mental health difficulties and will cost the state a lot of money in years to come. And the conditions that we're letting people live in today, in 20 years' time, we're going to really be, that's going to cost the state a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we have to get, there have to be real jobs. There have to be, we need to look at the whole issue of how we're going to deal with 9,000 people on the housing list.
Can I put then something to you? And I was very, very critical of the last administration. I'm not talking about the one we've got there now, but the one that went before that, and that would have gone back to about 2002 almost. And what I saw, because I'm in that sector, is basically whenever there was a problem, let's throw some money at it. We never really addressed problems at all. Now, because of that, when all of that revenue dried up, well, the capacity to deliver on those so-called Cllr promises also dried up. Do people, to a degree, have to say, hold on, this bribe is not in my interest? And many would say that that's what happened for several elections, is that the electorate turned a blind eye to the bribes. Do we need to rebalance that thinking as well,
absolutely.
Francis?
I think again, my background, as I keep saying, is in social care, and I have a huge interest in older people and people with disability, and obviously younger people. And they're the three sectors that a society should be judged by how well we look after.
Okay.
We pay tax, and we all pay tax, even though we don't particularly like paying it. But we pay tax in the expectation that our children are educated, that we don't have people waiting on trolleys, that we don't have we have proper health services, that we have proper jobs. And unfortunately, I just can't see that recovery to the extent, like I keep saying, a lot of people have done well out of it, the top 10% in the country, own most of the wealth,
Can I put something else to you then, Francis? And it's what I call the disconnect between the rhetoric and the outcome. 4 years ago, I went to I was up at the Progressive Synagogue in Rathmines. The rabbi, who was a woman, stood up and was talking about a living wage. Now, I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't heard the concept much before. And she went on to say, they introduced a living wage for all their employees. We're going back 3 years now. And now I'm seeing posters around here, a living wage, it's, we're on the way, it's possible. I cannot see why we cannot institute, because a living wage, okay, it's an amount, but it's also a value. And I cannot see how we, as a country, small, cannot introduce something like that, and instead of saying to pensioners, well, there's a certain amount, we're looking at their lives and we're looking at their needs.
Absolutely.
How do you feel there?
Well, a living wage is based on It's really interesting because it's based on having proper clothing.
Yeah.
It also acknowledges that people need a social life, and it has the amount comes up, the average rent, that kind of stuff. And basically, absolutely, we have a lot of pensioners. Like again, I keep going. The expectation years ago was that when you bought your house, you wouldn't end up having to pay property tax on it. So
Indeed.
now we've got property tax, we've water charges brought in. So we've more, everything is tax. Now the new bin charge where they're talking about weight and stuff that Alan Kelly announced yesterday. And basically people are just struggling. They don't have the money to live on.
Yeah.
And again, we're going back to what kind of society we want moving forward. I think, as we come towards the 100-year celebration, that we do have a republic of equals, that everybody is, and we voted, again, we're going back to, we voted for equality there. But equality has to be for everybody, and we have to have that for elderly, we have to have it for disability. And I think disability people in Ireland have been treated absolutely as second-class citizens, and I think they deserve better. We still have a lot of people, and especially in Dublin Mid West, we have a lot of people living in institutions, and those institutions shouldn't be there in 2016. They should be out in the community living full lives the same as everyone else, with what we were just discussing, a living wage. So it's all tied together. I don't think we can just take one sector. There's while it might be very complex, I mean, Lidl's and Aldi's have recently announced that they're paying a living wage to all their staff, and I can't see why some of the bigger companies in particular can't just automatically do it. While I do understand that might be harder for smaller businesses, to survive if they had to pay out, I still think that most businesses, with a few adjustments, could pay a lot more than they're paying.
Could it be that we're coming to the end of a flawed business model? Because when you think about it, what you've just said, and it struck me listening to you, is that a small business says, well, I can't afford to pay a living wage. But if you have a look at what a small business is, it's usually not more than a couple of people. And the idea that somehow or other that this 2 or 3 people over there, they get the maximum of the deal, and this one over there, because they're not quite in with that, they get pretty much what they get. They get to take what they're offered. And I just wonder, do we need to go back to this whole concept of a social contract? In other words, that we have an economy out there which generates wealth, but we need to have a better mechanism of how that wealth is distributed. Because what I'm seeing in terms of inequality, is going back to the days that I grew up in,
Absolutely.
where it was seriously unequal in the 50s.
Yeah. And we've spoken about this up at the council. We've debated a lot of these issues up at the council at different motions. And basically, yes, absolutely. We've gone in a lot of ways backwards, because we've a lot more poverty now in the country than we had a few years ago. And while we might, I keep saying, come back to, we did have very difficult decisions to be made. But I think people with disability in particular were hit with most of the cuts. They percentage-wise, they got most of the cuts. Elderly got a lot of cuts, and childcare got a lot of cuts. And they're the 3 areas, as I said, I think society should be judged on how we look after the most vulnerable people.
Yeah. Well, that of course then, Francis, leads into a couple of other issues, and that is that the consequences of economic actions. And one of the issues that people say, well, we put in a cut, or we downsize, or whatever language that we use, that beyond the economic effect there's no impact. Personally, what I've seen, it has a much greater impact, because we have all the mental health issues, we have relationship issues, we have health issues, and so on and so forth. Is that what you're seeing, in particularly as a representative?
Absolutely, and like we were talking about the living wage there, the living wage acknowledges that people need a social life and they need social interaction. And one of the biggest things for older people in particular is that their money that they have to enjoy, I suppose, the retirement, that's very limited at the minute. And there's basically people are making a decision, like that lady I spoke to the other day in Lucan, that she has a choice now to have heating on or to eat. I think that's not the society that I would have envisaged, or I think any of our leaders in 1916 would have realised that in 100 years' time we were going to have. That's going back to the kind of poverty that we had in 1916 and you know, well throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s, you know, in Ireland.
It's an interesting one, Francis, because I interviewed one of Dublin's Lord Mayors a couple of years ago, quite a wealthy man, I won't say who it was, and I was putting to him the issue that should we perhaps have more guarantees, and I wasn't saying a guarantee of housing, but we should all have a guarantee of shelter, we should all have a guarantee of food, basic necessities, and somehow or other the thinking that we've got now is essentially market thinking. In other words, there's €200 as a pensioner, survive on that.
Yeah, get on with it.
Yeah.
And no, that's interesting that you're saying that, because actually the motion I have down for the next council meeting is to discuss the whole issue of the right to a home.
Yes.
And I believe, particularly, and I believe it was one of the flaws of the Cllr Act, is that we should have had it written in that children were entitled to a home. I don't think it's acceptable to have 1,500 children sleeping in hostels in town. They should be in proper, secure, you know, accommodation where they can grow as people and live a proper life. I think you know, again, we're going back to, in 20 years, the economic cost, if we don't spend it now, and I know the argument is, oh, we don't have, but in 20 years' time, we've got people that are staying in hotels. The damage that's doing to families, and they're all talking about family, is particularly bad in terms of mental health, and that the people that are living in direct provision centres in Clondalkin, we have a direct provision centre in the village, those people are not being treated as
let's go back to the LGBT issue, Francis, because again, you've got a lot of experience as a social worker in certain areas, and I think the perception out there, excuse me, is that, well, you got marriage equality, there's no more problems anymore, so there's not going to be no more mental health issues then. And I just wanted to characterise it with what we were discussing earlier of how somebody went onto social media this week and said, I shouldn't be doing this programme because I'm not gay enough. And it struck me as, well, we're even going to we're going to categorise it so we can, you know, and if you go around thinking you're gay and you're not gay enough, it's, in other words, the whole issue that we had, somebody out there still thinks they can determine our identity, our existence, our whole being. What's your feeling about that, Francis?
First of all, like, obviously, I mean, I'm very grateful and thankful, I suppose, that the people of Ireland decided to vote yes, equality. Dublin Mid West returned to 70% vote, which probably average around the country. But
except Roscommon, of course. But that's
except Roscommon. But no, and I'm now engaged with my partner after nearly 17 years together. So I'm very grateful for that, and I think we have moved a long way, so we need to acknowledge that. But I also think for our gender recognition bill didn't go as far as it could have.
Yes.
There's a lot of issues for identity. People should be able to be who they are and live full lives, and it shouldn't really matter, you know, whether they're LGBT. It shouldn't really, at the end of the day, I think we've had a situation in Ireland, and I would never want to go back there, where it was a dark place in Ireland, you know, which I spoke about here before. And I think we've a better society since the 23rd of May, that people seem to be more accepting. And I think it's general, but I do believe that we still have to deal with the problems of bullying. We still have to deal, and there's a lot of work has to be done around that. I think just because we introduced a law, some families are not going to be as accepting. Some people are still going to find it very difficult to come out as LGBT in Ireland.
As we come to the election, how do you feel? Because you were very prominent in it, and I went to a lot of what I would call the activism over the previous 3 to 5 years. Some of the parties are now coming out and saying, well, you got that because of us.
No, I don't believe that any party got that, or me as an independent got it. I believe that was made up of probably a 40-year struggle in Ireland, from people like David Norris and different people that came out and spoke very highly over the years and took on, you know, the state when it was a very difficult time. I acknowledge that the time was right and that people came. I didn't think for a long time that I would see it in my lifetime, But I'm very glad we did. But I don't think any party should take responsibility for that. I think that was a huge credit goes to the people, yes, equality.
A classic example of the power of participatory politics.
Absolutely.
Francis Timmons, the people in Clondalkin out there, they're very fortunate to have you as a representative. Perhaps even the people of Dublin Mid West will also have you as a representative soon. So come the general election, we wish you all the very best. Francis Timmons.
Thanks, Mick.
Yep. Just want to say thank you to the fabulous Heather on the desk, who may or may not be gay enough depending on what the criteria are. I'm still doing the entrance exam just in case, because I failed it the last time round. But anyway, don't go anywhere. This Dublin edition is coming up, and I don't know how gay that is, but I'm sure it's got a gay dimension as well. So I'm Mick Fitz, and I'll be back in a week's time. You take care.
I want to have a little pride in my world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am.